anymore. He said, quote, "You want to know what this was really about? The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did." Wow, so a very, very, very strong quote that could not be more relevant today in 2016, given the climate that we're in. But a lot of people are also kind of saying, well, that doesn't sound like something he would say. We have to remember that Dan Baum, the journalist who released this quote, who did the interview with him while he was writing a book, he did release it in a book back in 2012. Is this thing on? No one really talked about it. So now it just resurfaced in a magazine recently. And so now everyone seems to be talking about this. So it's like whether or not this happened, this man has been dead for quite a few years.
Died in 1999.
It's a long time ago. Why is it all coming out now? People are saying, we want to hear the tapes. But at the same time, though, I don't know. Could you put it past him?
It sounds like it could be true. I'm one of those people that says, let me hear the tapes, let me see the hard copy, and then maybe, you know, it fits too easily into what we know now. I don't see a top Nixon aide ever saying something like this. We're talking about a man who was arguably the scapegoat for Watergate. He spent 18 months in a federal corrections institution. He died of diabetes in '99. I don't know. I mean, it's a sexy story. We want to believe this, but I'd like to hear a tape of it.
Yeah. You know, to give some points on why it could possibly be true. I mean, he was a little bit older. He had time to reflect. He was far removed from the heat of the moment. This is decades on that he comes out and he starts speaking like this.
He wouldn't be an idiot, though, just because he's aging. I mean, he was 69.
I'm not saying he's an idiot for it. I'm just saying maybe he was more upfront about it and wasn't in the heat of the moment, right? He wasn't in office. He'd already been in jail for 18 months, right? So maybe he was just letting it off of his conscience. But like you said, there are no tapes of it. So it's like, how are you going to know these things are true or not? But like I said, I mean, look, it couldn't be more relevant today. In other words, what he's saying is the intense racial targeting that we see is that's kind of become synonymous with the war on drugs in this country. It's not an unintended side effect. And that is something that we talk a lot about, especially in the wake of, you know, different events happening in Ferguson, for example, in the probing of the police departments in cities like Ferguson and Chicago. The amount of corruption, the targeting of minorities and people living in lower income communities to make up for the city's deficits.
There's no question that happens.
Hitting them with small, stupid things like marijuana, for example, more so than any other race, right? For example, if you look at African Americans in certain places like Ferguson, it's so unbalanced that it's not even funny. So you can't deny those things are happening.
Oh, I'm absolutely not denying those at all. I think that they absolutely do.
I just wouldn't put it past this country to tie it to something that was institutionalized, is all I'm saying.
Look, the 1960s were a really complicated time in American history, and it's entirely plausible that given the issues of race happening in the country at that time, given a very unpopular war that had been pretty well publicized, and you had major movements coming out speaking against this war, primarily with hippies and beatniks, and targeting specific groups because of drug use to get rid of them politically, that would make total sense. What doesn't make sense is that some guy would have a deathbed confession or a later in life confession, you know, making the career of a journalist, supposedly. You know, you and I in this work, we would kill for sources like this. A first-hand source saying something this salacious, are you kidding? Just from our experience, though, we know that rarely happens.
Such a hot quote. So why would he keep it under wraps for so long and then release it in a book just silently and then re-release it years later? That is kind of suspicious. You're right. But would you put it past the U.S. government to do something like that? Let us know in the comments.